the topic is grape juice concentrate, and this is a shaila. A lot of people hear about it. Comes up. People want to know. The Regalis we mentioned before about wine and kedem, and as his daughter is involved in the wine, kosher winemaking. So people want to know: can you use kedem grape juice for kiddush? It's a common shaila, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about this shaila. So let me just discuss it for a minute. What the shaila is. Grape juice, of course, we know that a person could use for is bari priagafen. The Gemara says, "Soichet adam." A person could squeeze a eshkol of an ovim and emerald of kiddush hayom. You could use it fresh grapes, grape juice. You could use for kiddush. The shaila is that when they make grape juice today, they don't just squeeze grapes, but they concentrate it. They make something called grape juice concentrate, which means they remove about 80% of the water, and they're left with a very thick syrup, more than a syrup even, it's very, very thick. And then they will mix that back in when they want to create grape juice. Now, by Kedem, the way they do it is it's actually always more than 50% single strength grape juice, which means single strength means regular grape juice is always the roiv. But if you look at the ingredients, you'll see it does include afterwards. They'll say grape juice. They'll say grape juice concentrate and water, and they rehydrate it. They add the water back in to make it back to 100% juice. 100% juice means it'll equal the original taste. So it'll taste back. So again, it's more than 50% single strength, but then it has grape juice concentrate added as well. And there are those who question maybe grape juice concentrate shouldn't be kosher for kiddush. There are other brands that are 100% grape juice concentrate, meaning they get you back to single strength grape juice by using only grape juice concentrate. There's economic reasons to use grape juice concentrate. It's easier to store, easier to transport. If you're going to transport a tanker of grape juice, you would need five trucks to transport as much as you could in one truck of grape juice concentrate if you're going to transport it. So it's much cheaper, obviously, to deal with. Then when you bottle it, you put the water back in. Belsky says, before we get to Belsky, so Shlomo Zalman Auerbach has a tshuva in the Milchas Shlomo. I quoted part of it on the handout. I don't know if we gave out where he questions whether the bracha on it is can be whether it can be used for kiddush. And his issue is that it's actually what you're using is actually 80% water. And as opposed to grape juice, where the water, the component itself is wine, the water component comes from the grape. It's very proguffin. But here this is just plain water that's put in. Maybe it shouldn't be kosher for kiddush. In his initial paragraph, he throws in here a very important concept, and he says, "What about yayin shel tzemukim?" He says, "Well, this is where Shlomo Zalman is speaking." He says, "What about raisin wine?" Okay, you take tzemukim, you take raisins, and we know you could add a lot of water. There's a shaila how much water you're allowed to add to make wine, but you could even add a very significant amount of water, and the bracha still will be very proguffin on it. Even if he brings here those who say even as long as the raisins are slightly more than 1 to 6, meaning it's not going to be bottle b'sheish in the water. Okay, so you can have basically 5.5 times the water connected the raisins, and still the bracha, it's still chashiv yayin, and still it's considered to be wine. So it says Shlomo Zalman, he says, no, that's very different in that case. The shiny hasam, kivan shakol toises, there everything ferments together. When you make raisin juice or raisin wine, what you do is you add water to the raisins, and then it ferments together, it turns into wine. The water itself ferments. The water itself turns into wine. So it's toises yachad imat smukim. Then there's a halacha of nishtanu gama mayim liyos yayin. Then even the water, the part that originally started out as water, transforms into wine. It's no longer what you are drinking is 100% wine. Even the water part is wine. And that's the chiddush of Toises. Okay, and there's a discussion about it. He quotes you, Mar Mekomos, Beis Yosef, Magen Avram, etc., in Taf Sav Beis. We'll see more about that in a second, about Taf Sav Beis. But Nishtana Hamayim Liyos Yayin. So where this makes a very big nafkamina also is regarding matzah on Pesach, because for matzah we know that if you want to make, let's say you want to make egg matzah, so you're not allowed to add any water to it. You have to add only mei peros. If you add only mei peros, it's not machmitz. It doesn't turn to chametz, the egg matzah. But if you add any water, even a drop, then it'll become chametz right away. So can you use raisin wine for matzah, for egg matzah? So the halacha is that you can, because the water in it is no longer water. Halachically, the water has transformed into wine. So he says that's different. But we're talking about over here by the grape juice contrary, where there's water added and it's not toises. It didn't ferment back together again. Okay, so that's the shaila, and therefore there are those who don't want to use grape juice concentrate for kiddush for this reason. Belsky wrote a tshuva about it. It's published in his sefer, where he brings different strong arguments to show. The Gemara's talk about if you have dried out wine, and you reconstitute it, and you can make kiddush on it. Brings different various rayas. But the truth is that grape juice concentrate is kosher for kiddush. But the truth is, the Mincha Shlomo himself, in a way, addresses the shaila, and as we'll see.
If you come closer, there's a shaila from the floor. You have to speak up.
A lot of our grape juice have concentrate added just to maintain consistent flavor, but they don't have to cause it as a concentrate added, but it has a significant.
You said there are two types of concentrate, if I understand what you're saying. There's some concentrate we just added to flavor, as opposed to the concentrate which is the Iyunim. I'm not sure.
It's have beautiful flavor on all the bottles.
The flavor. What is Elam asking now? 1 second, Rabbi Gersten. There's a questions here from the floor. What is Elam asking?
Saying that the concentrate is not for any purpose other than just to make the flavor consistent.
If the concentrate is for no purposes other to make
Okay, that's a good question. You're right. If it would be a very minor, it's not a very minor amount. It's the again, like I mentioned before, the single strength is a little bit more than 50%.
What's like if you can move back, I'm sorry to do this to you, but we can't see your face properly.
Okay,
so if you can just move the computer back a little bit, or whatever you're speaking into.
Okay.
Yeah, now this is better.
The single strength.
What's that? One more question.
There was a Kedem bottle about 6 months ago. That was a narrow bottle that was not concentrated.
Yes, they do make a wine, a grape juice that has no concentrate in it for those who want to be machmir. They do make that.
So I'll ask you another question. 2 questions. I know that the Muhudarim Neitaira who don't use grape juice A, but they use Kedem grape juice A, but they use Kedem grape juice B. Is that what's going on here? Do you know what I'm talking about?
They have these bottles of wine, correct, of grape juice that don't have in it any concentrate for those who want to be machmir. They do make such a product. You have to read the ingredients panel carefully to see that it doesn't have grape juice concentrate listed.
I know there are
but
2 types of bottles.
Them, the regular 64-ounce bottles that you buy are grape juice concentrate. Okay, again, it's a little bit more than 50%. I don't know the exact amount, if it's 52% or whatever it is, slightly more than 50% single strength. Those that say that alone takes care of the issue, because Shlomo Zalman's issue of not being roiv. So it could be with the kedem anyways, you get out of the problem because it's roiv is going to be actual grape juice. But there are other brands that are completely grape juice concentrate. They'll say from concentrate on it. And those, so that's really the question is, I started with Kedem, but maybe Kedem is not, it's not really so much the Shaila. Kedem has a lot of milas in the way they do it because, again, it's Roiv. But let's say in theory, or there are other brands that are completely concentrate, can you use those for Kiddush? So I want to point out another line that Shlomo Zalman writes, and I listed that separately in a separate paragraph, and it's towards the end of his tshuva. And from here, you really get an idea of what he was discussing. Okay, even though it wasn't clear in the beginning, I think it becomes very clear at the end from what he did, how he describes this over here. He says, he asks another question at the end. Okay, so beforehand, in the beginning, he asks from raisins. And from raisins, he says, well, okay, that becomes toises together, like we just explained. But then he says, ach tzarachian, harei mavur shigame bishul shel anavim oitzbukim. You don't have to ferment it together. There's another way to make wine, which is even if you just cook it together. If I cook grapes in water, or I cook raisins, even if it doesn't ferment, it also has a din of yayin. It has a din of yayin mavushal. Mikol makam harei yayin, and the water part of it too becomes wine. Lenient bari per gafen v'kiddush, and he quotes like it says in Shulchan Aruch and Reish Beis, and he does. You look in the Orchos Chaim, has an arichas about this. Okay, the Sefer Orchos Chaim. I think it's Orchos Chaim Spinka, and he says, even though this can't turn into wine anymore, it's already been cooked. Ulam shiny hasam da bishul chashiv k'may tesisa. Now he says another yesod. Cooking grapes or cooking raisins with water also is the same as tesisa, as fermentation. Sorry. Shebahapech gam esamayim liyayin. This too will turn the water into wine. The chashiv k'mazik al chatlas, and it'll become like regular wine. And even though the Talmud he says it's not mamish k'mo yayin, it's good enough. Mikol makam efshir the mikol makam harei chashiv ki yayin chalash the soyed u'mesameach tzas. The yesod of wine is that it has to be soyed u'mesameach, which is what the Gemara says. Okay, the Gemara in Daf Lamed Hey Beis, right? The Gemara says chamra ispatarti soyed u'mesameach. Okay, it has these two qualities to it. It satisfies and it makes a person happy. So this doesn't turn into alcohol anymore, but he says it's still soyd u'mesameach tzas.
Has no alcohol content. How could it be
no alcohol content? Correct. And he still says
how could it be mesameach without alcohol
content?
It
makes you a little bit happy. Grape juice makes whatever the reason is why kids love it. I don't know. Makes kids happy. Masha'in Kain, he says, this is the key line over here. Beneath the dinan, what I'm discussing, what I have an issue with, is shamayim rakbu ravim imatamtzis, the loikimoy bishul b'shriya. What I'm discussing, says Rosh Shlomo Zalman, is like a petal mix. It's like one of these syrups. You buy a petal, these raspberry flavored syrups. You buy a grape juice syrup, or you buy one of those canisters like you buy from frozen orange juice. You get one of those frozen grape juice things, and you just mix it with the water. That's what I'm discussing. That I have an issue with. But the way they make all the grape juice that you buy, the bottled grape juice, it's not just some guy sitting there mixing it together and then pouring it into a bottle. They cook it together. They take the grape juice and they cook it with the water. They make a remixture through bishul. Even Rosh Shlomo Zalman should agree, or does agree, according to what he writes, that when you cook it, bishul is a real connection of the water with that's like a tesisa. It reconnects the water with the original. What his issue was just what we'll call a cold mixture. If I take frozen grape juice and I mix it with water, or I take a petal mix, one of these syrups, I mix it with water, that's no good. Okay, so you see over here, the bottom line of that second paragraph, he says, Masha'in came benida dinan, shamayim, rakbu ravim imatamtzis, v'loikimoy bishul v'shriya. Okay, so I'm just pointing out that the truth is, it's almost, it almost is not negaya to what we discuss in our homes when we make kiddush. I don't even know if anybody sells a frozen grape juice concentrate, kosher one at least today, that maybe in Eretz Yisrael they do. In America, I'm not aware of any brands that sell frozen. You can buy orange juice concentrate, but I don't know of any. So this would be the shaila that Rosh Shlomo Zalman is discussing, whether you could use this.
What about
person had their hands on original grape juice concentrate and wanted to make it in their own house, just mix it in with water and stir it. That would be the shaila he's discussing. But when you buy it already pre-made, where they cooked it together, they pasteurize it, they do a whole process to it. So that's not negeya. And anyways, like we mentioned, the kedem is more than 50%. So a lot of what he discusses about his issues about being roiv mayim don't apply to the kedem. They do a pedafka that way to get around this issue. And besides, Belsky writes, and he brings many strong rayas to defend, even if you did make it with this concentrate, it would be considered wine, and you could make kiddush on it, even if it would be made from concentrate. There are many strong rayas. I'm not going to go through all his rayas, but he brings from the Gemaras in Shabbos about this. Okay.
Before we move on to
Yeah.
the heart of the palm, did Rabbi Belsky discuss the difference between light and regular?
Yes.
Did light?
So we discussed that with him as well. So the light grape, so the regular grape juice is brought back to what we call 100% juice, which means it tastes the exact same as if you use single strength juice. Okay, so regular grape juice, or like people mentioned, you could buy the ones without concentrate. They will taste almost exactly the same as, I say almost, because of course there are differences. Anytime you pasteurize, you concentrate, you're going to lose a little bit of taste, and Shlomo Zalman makes mention of that too, but it'll taste almost the same, as opposed to light grape juice, where they water it down. They add about 33% water to the mixture. The way they're able
What's
to
the
do
percent?
this
Sorry, what was that? 33%?
is the water. Yeah, it's about 2/3 grape juice, 1/3 water. Again, this is roughly. I don't know if it's 32% or 33%, but somewhere around there. If you look at the ingredients panel, though, you'll notice that it'll say it has half as much sugar as the original. And how do they do that? The answer is they use not all grapes have the same amount of sugar in them. You can get sweet grapes, right? I'm sure you buy grapes. Sometimes grapes are very sweet. Sometimes grapes are very tart. Okay, they have less sugar, but there's more acid in them. As the grapes ripen more and more, the sugar level goes up and up, right? You can get wines that say late harvest, very high sugar, and you can get very sweet wines with high alcohol, right? So we all know that the sugar in grapes is not uniform. So they use low sugar grapes for it, and that's how they're able to get the half sugar. Okay, but there's another mila in their doing so, which is that these grapes, because they are low in sugar, they are high in acid, which means they have more flavor. So someone, I don't know if they were meant to mention this or not, but different types of use of grape juice concentrate. The truth is there are. In grape juice, you're putting in the grape juice concentrate for flavor. You're putting it in because you want it to taste like grape juice. A lot of drinks will put in something called white grape juice concentrate. White grape juice concentrate it's almost like sugar. It's like putting corn syrup in. You don't want to put corn syrup because it gets a bad name. So instead you put in white grape juice concentrate. It's almost the same thing. It's just a sugar. It has almost no taste. People drink it. They don't know they're drinking grape juice. They just think they're drinking sugar water. So this is the opposite of that. When you use high acid grapes that are low in sugar, they're very flavorful. They taste a lot like grape. They're more the grape taste, but less of the sugar. Some people like sugar. Some people don't like sugar, right? That's different people's preferences. Some people think the grape juice, the regular grape juices are too sweet. Some people think not sweet enough, whatever it is. So when they make the light grape juice, they're able to get, like we said, half the sugar, but it tastes more. It'll have more of a grapey taste because of the acid. It's higher acid grapes that they use. They do water it down though, like we said, 1/3 water, but they say because it's higher in acid, the grape flavor remains much more, and it's able to be watered down. It's able to have that 1/3 removed and still taste like grape juice. Again, it will taste different. It'll be much less sweet. It has half the sugar of regular grape juice. So we did discuss with Belsky. He knows what it tastes like. I don't know if I brought him in a cup of it or not to drink. I don't remember, but I remember we discussed it with him, and he said that he felt it was still bari pragafen. It tasted enough like grape juice. Now the people bring up a question because they do add an artificial sweetener to it. There is something called acid sulfate potassium, or it's also called ACE-K, and there's a very tiny amount that they add. We spoke to Kedem about the equivalent of how much they add. It's the equivalent of just mamish, it's like maybe another 2 or 3% water. meaning if you wouldn't have added that 2 or 3%, that's the whole difference in terms of the amount of sweetness that it would have. So they're just bringing it up, just a little, it brings it up like a notch.
Nice on those bottles, if I remember correctly, that's
Yes.
the same kosher lekiddush l'odal kaisis from the Tzelem HaRav
Correct.
from 80 years ago. So there's no
Correct.
difference how much water you poured into it. What if
No,
I poured
I
instead
would
of-
say it's no difference. That Belsky held that was the limit. You should not add any water to your light grape juice. He held that it was still, people like it this way. People still drink it as grape juice. He held that you could add a third. In fact, he held you could add a third to your regular grape juice also.
Yeah,
But
I understand
you
that.
add-
This is
If you add a
worse.
third to your regular grape juice, you're only going to get a third less sugar. If you
Right.
buy this, you're getting half the sugar. That's the mile of buying this versus the regular grape juice.
So he held lechatchila, you can use this for dal kaisis. That's what you're telling
Yeah,
me?
I don't like to use the word lechatchila. I don't know what the word lechatchila means. Did he hold that is it better to use the regular grape juice? Maybe he did. I don't know. He held it was good. He held you could use it. I asked him about it. Others in the room, we discussed it with him for a while. We went back. He asked us to get questions. We went back to Kedem. We got back the answers about how much the Ace K they added and everything. He said you could use. He at the end of the day, he said you could use this for Kiddush. You want to know, is it better to use the regular grape juice? Maybe. I don't know. I didn't get that out of him. Okay, is there a mile? Is it then again? That's what I'm saying. I don't know the word. I don't want to use the word lechatchila. Is one better than the other? Maybe. But some people have to watch their sugar. So for them, lechatchila is the b'diavad. You know what I mean? The b'diavad is lechatchila, but they don't have a choice. He held it is kosher. That's the bottom line. He held you could use it for kiddush. You can make a bar priyagofen on it. It still has all the taste. It still has all the milas of grape juice. Okay.
Yeah. Any
Go on to the
other
next one?
questions before we move off grape juice? Rabbi Sai? Okay, next issue, Hearts of Palm.
So it's just a sugi in Shabbos. So we'll discuss a little bit about the Hearts of Palm. It's a kaira. Kaira, in case people didn't know what it was, it's called in English. It's called Hearts of Palm. It's a machlekes in the Gemara what bracha you make. Right? Yehuda says you make a bar priadama. Shmuel says you make a shahakol. Shmuel was mishabeach Rabbi Yehuda. But Lamaisa, the Gemara says that the halacha is like Shmuel, that you make a shahakol, because loynati inchiadaita de kaira. People don't plant kaira in order to eat it. It ruins the tree. It's detrimental. So therefore, Pashas is the bracha on kaira should be a shahakol. However, today there's a whole industry of selling hearts of palm, and people do plant the kaira adaita dahachi, and therefore the bracha should be bari priyadama, and that's what Belsky held. The bracha on kaira is bari priyadama, and that should seem to be an open shut case. It's a chayra mefurish Gemara. However, I should mention that there are other rabbanim. There's different kashas agencies. There are rabbanim who say that the bracha on it is bari priyadama.
You can't say it, but I can. I'm going to Moshe Heinemann holds that it's an eighth.
Correct.
Can you explain daitoi?
What?
Can you explain
Oh,
daitoi?
so explain exactly. So where is he coming from? So as I spoke to somebody. I didn't speak to Rabbi Heinemann himself. I spoke to somebody at the Star K, and he asked them what's his basis. So he said a very good svara. He said there's a difference. When Chazal were discussing kaira, they were discussing pashtus palm tree, date palms. People don't plant date palms at dahachi, and even if they would, the bracha would be bari priyadama. Why? Because the date palm produces a fruit called a date, and the date is the ikar of the fruit tree. Therefore, the date is the bari priyadama. The date palm, the hearts of palm is therefore a secondary fruit. A secondary fruit is a bari priyadama. The types of palm trees that they use for the hearts of palm are not date palms. It's a different type of palm. I don't remember what it is. And it doesn't produce an edible fruit. The only edible part of this tree is the heart of palm. That is what you plant it for. That becomes its fruit. Since that's the ikar, it becomes a bari priyadama. There is no fruit. Okay, so even though the Gemara was discussing date palm, which was the standard palm tree, it was in the time of the Chazal, whenever we talk about kapais, right? We're usually talking about a kapais tamarim. A kapais means a palm, right? Like a kaf, right? And it's called that because the way it looks, right? A palm looks like a palm. And in English, it's the same word, a palm. So it's a right? But anyway, so he said the bracha is very great. Now the truth is that this is the famous machlokes. What bracha do you make on if I eat the tree itself, but that's the ikar fruit? Is it a bari pri or is it a bari pri adama? Okay, and where does this shaila come up? It comes up in Shulchan Aruch by sugar. This is discussion. There's actually 3 days. Do you make a bari pri do you make a bari pri adama, or do you make a shahakal niyavaro? And all 3 shitas are brought in the Rishonim. In the tour holds you make a bari pri on sugar, because even though you're not eating a fruit, you're eating the tree. You're eating the cane. The cane is a tree. It lasts from year to year. It's not it's a tree. And therefore the Torah says that the bracha on eating a cane is a bari pri. And Mistama, this is the basis where Rabbi Heinemann says that the bracha on hearts of palm today should be a bari pri. However, this is a machlokes rishonim. It's not so pashut. A quote a little bit from the Torah. You have it right in front of you on the screen. He says al sukra, right, on sugar. The Bahag says you make a bari pri, and the Rambam says you make on kanim mesukim, on sweet reeds. Okay, we extract from them the sugar. Right, it looks like salt, right? Okay, so now this is about you extracted it. Okay, bari pri adama. Yesh oimrim bari pri, but some say no, it remains eitz. Also, if you suck on it, if you eat the thing itself, some say you make a bari pri adama. But the Rambam says you make a shahakal, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins, that we make a shahakal on sugar. Now Shul Hashav Dvarim says the Torah. Then he says Vadai is a period of Barchal Perpet. He comes out at the end. Vadai, this is the Torah said, and therefore it's Perpet. Okay, so you have basically different opinions about what bracha do you make. So it's the way we paskin l'maisen to Shulchan Aruch. It's a suffix. So you make shakal because we know akulam and varchol of shakal niyabevaru yatsa. It's a suffix. It's a machlokes. There's not going to be any achra to the shaila. You can ask any chacham you want. Right, so therefore the psak is, and that's a shulchan machriya. You make a shahakal like the Rambam on sugar. Okay, but let's get back. But sugar is extracted. What about if I eat the fruit itself? If I eat the cane itself, what bracha do I make? So in the Bir Halacha, he discusses this a little bit. He says he brings over here about a sugar. Okay, he says he brings the bahag. Now the Bahag, it's a little bit confusing because the Bahag writes different brachas. He actually gives two examples. He gives a example of a Dhamma and a Eitz. He explains both shitas. So sometimes the Bahag is used to refer to Eitz and sometimes to Hadama. It's a little bit confusing, but we'll see here. The Bahag Gufa Isa Dechia Ledea Kamaisa Vizela Shainai Sukkar Vikanya the Sukkar Bar Pri Adama. Okay, so the Bahag here says that the bracha on sugar is bari pri adama, okay, as opposed to what the Torah quoted that the Bahag said bari pri. Now he's quoting it because he it's not a stira. He actually brings both. Okay, but anyway, he says sukkar v'kanya sukkar is bari pri adama, meaning if I eat the kanya itself, I make a bari pri adama. Not okay, and the sugar, the extraction. So the extraction and the fruit itself are both bari pri adama. La mushroom the srile the kana lavetzu. It's not because it's not a tree. It is. But that's what he holds. The hafagav, the eitzu, even the left, piri, kemapik. It's not a fruit though. The lav piri kachlinan. It's not a fruit. I'm eating part of the tree. Okay, so this is the aside of the Bahag, that you make a bari pri adama if you eat the part of the tree, even though that's thicker. Why do I grow it? I grow it for the sugar. I'm eating the sugar cane. I still make a bari pri adama because it's not a fruit. It is the tree itself. Okay, now I'm skipping a little bit. And then the Bir Halacha says, therefore he says, V'tmiya alataz. Sheyoetz lotzeis misveika. The Taz gives the following eitzah to what to do with sugar. Okay, you want to be yaitse, right? Like we mentioned, we make a shahakol misafik, but better would be avoid the shaila completely. How so? Well, I'll get different foods, right? Like if you don't know what to do, so I get a pretzel, I'll make a mezainis, I'll take an apple, I'll make a bread praise, right? So what's he miyayitz? Yikach bread praise, the yichav and lifter berachasai al zucker. Take an apple. And when you make the bread praise, you'll be mechavin to pater the sugar. That's the eitzah. Okay, and then you'll make something else, a shahakol, and you'll be yaitze with fine. In fact, the biralach, effect the Chavetz Chaim, the tema, amayla choshesh l'shitas kol hani rapsa now the svilei de brachosei rak bari priyadama. What about the bari priyadama? Why isn't he worried about that? Okay, ulefi zeh afilu b'diavel yatsa. If you only make a bari priya eitz and you weren't yaitze then if it's the bracha is bari priyadama. Right, l'das kol hani gedolim. Now the truth is, it's not such a kasha in his case because he's going to make a shahakol anyway on something else, right? Fine, but still he asked it as a kasha and says, but you weren't yaitze. If your point over here is you're trying to make a chumrah, you want to be yaitze all the days. You weren't yaitze all the days. There are many gedolim who hold that the bracha over here is, and then he says the yaitz is like this. He says, therefore yaitze time hayaloi yaitz. Aplis farasai. Take your class tour. If you want to give an eitzah, what you should have said is, bring a potato and make a bari priyadama. Then everyone would agree with that. So l'chayra, it seems that Rabbi Heinemann is going like the Taz, and he's still holding that the ikar is we paskin like the tour, that the bracha is bari priyah on a sugar cane. And that, okay, obviously we don't because of the Rambam Shita. We make a shahakol. But if you didn't have a shahakol, then it was only between bari priyah and bari priyah dama, you'd make a bari priyah. And that's the Taz. That's basically what the Taz is saying. And the Bir Allah is saying, no, you can't ignore all the Rishonim that say that the bracha is bari priyah dama. And therefore it would be a better eitzah to make a bari priyah dama on the sugar or the hearts of palm than to make a bari priyah. If I make a bari priyah on the hearts of palm, there are many Rishonim I'm not yaitze. If I make a bari priyadama, I'm yaitze according to everybody. So, is there a tzad to make a bari priyah? Absolutely. But is there a better tzad to make a bari priyadama? Yes. And therefore, the proper bracha on a hearts of palm is a bari priyadama. Now, if a person wants to make an apple and be yaitze, and then take a potato and be yaitze, and absolutely, call it kavod. You could be yaitze, in the best way possible. But if a person doesn't want to go through all that, he just has a hearts of palm in front of him, he just wants to eat it, doesn't want to get so lumdish, the best bracha to make, according to the Mishnah Brura, is bari priyadama. Because it's not a fruit. And you have the bahag, and you have many Rishonim that say that that's bari priyadama. Okay. On to the next topic. Unless anybody has any questions. Yeah. Next topic. So, talk about
the end of the day, Puk Chazim Davar on hearts of palm, and the Olam makes an Adam on them. Is that correct?
think so. I believe so. Yes, bari priyadama, and it's a more, like we said, it's a more inclusive bracha. Even though there might be a tzad, like Rabbi Heinemann saying, it's not ridiculous. There's a taz, there's a basis, there's a tour, but yet Mishnah Brura seems to say that that's not the optimal bracha to make.
So how
Did he make a bari priyah? He yaitze.
How did Belsky hold these type of fakers? Did he ask you to go and find another something which is an Adama, like a Pringle, maybe an Adama or not, and therefore
okay, well maybe in a few minutes, but I don't know. I when I discussed with him, we usually didn't discuss Midas Chasidus. He himself was a Chassid. I know I saw him personally. He would go to tremendous lengths to be yaitze all different shittas and things that he did, but what he demanded of others was not that way at all. So he would tell people. People would ask a shaila, he would give them the answer. He would not tell people. Kamat never saw him give people.
But there are some places in halacha where the place can say that, the senior place can say that. Even going back to the Taz and among the Ram, but this doesn't qualify. Something like this. This is just a machlekes.
I think so. I think this is pashtus. It's a bari priyadama. Again,
If it is, that's your issue, right?
I didn't
got it,
discuss it
okay.
with him. Is it proper to make a bari prates on an apple and make a person with sugar like that? Look, there's so many foods that if you go through in our day, we'll see that we really have so many sveikas on the brachas, and we just, is a banana really a bari priyadama? Or maybe it should be a eitz, this and that. But we fall into certain routines of chocolate. Paiskim say you should really be making a bari prates if it's a minik to make a shackle, and we follow the minik. Are there big Hasidim who do
Rice itself? Rice itself.
Exactly, rice itself is a shaila, correct? Right, so many different foods. They have so many different sveikas about, and yet, we follow the minhagim. That's general what most Kol Yisrael does. We follow our minhagim. I once saw a beautiful pshat from it was written B'Shem Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He was talking about, it's nothing to do with this, but he was talking about being chazan and having 9 people answer, and if not, it's and then the Mishabura gives an eitzah how you should daven as the tefillas nadav in case you don't have enough answer. People answering, you shouldn't be a brachol atala. So he says originally when he was a young man he used to do that. He said when he got older he said whatever is going to be with the rest of Klal Yisrael should be with me too. And he said I'm not better than the rest of Klal Yisrael. That's it's brought down in this forum. That's what Shlomo Zalman said about himself. He said, I don't want to be different than the rest of Klal Yisrael. If this is the minig of Klal Yisrael, this is what we do. Even though there's a better way to do it. So again, you have to know when to apply that, when not to apply that. But I guess he saw that there wasn't, nobody did it the other way, whatever. There are things that we do, chumras for at different times. Okay, maybe during Keser Shebei Tshuva, we try to be more careful with things and whatever. Brachos is something that, there's really almost no limit. There's just someone just told me the other day a joke. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. About 2 people learned Hilchos Brachos together. And then at the end, they went their separate ways. They met a few years later. One was skinny like a skeleton, and the other one was very, very, very large. And they said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, we learned Hilchos Brachos. I come out nothing to eat. I always have sveikas and this and that. I cannot eat anything." And the other guy says, "So what happened to you?" He says, "Oh, I wash on everything now." So. It's the same idea, the different ways of dealing with it. You could go one, you could try to get out of fakers by what they say about Gedalim, that they come out and never knew what brachas to make because they always wash.
They here voted to wash on everything. Yes.
Yeah, wash on everything. Yeah, and I'm saying they say about Ramosha, they asked him whatever. They said he didn't know what the
only
food was.
whole wheat bread. Yeah.
Yeah, they said they didn't know. He said, "Oh, does your wife feed it to you every day?" She says, "Yeah, for something, but I always wash. I don't know, what bracha it is. Who knows? I don't know. I always wash." Okay, anyway, so
granola, puffed rice.
Rice, granola, rice cakes, yeah. So let's just have a little bit. Puffed rice or puffed grains in general are very priyadama.
What is that? Can the Rav define what that is? What is puffed rice?
Okay, so when we're discussing puffed rice, I should just differentiate between that and Rice Krispies. Rice Krispies are not puffed rice. Puffed rice would be like you buy these bags. Puffed rice, each one looks like it's blown up, but they're not crunchy. Another way to describe it is, we'll talk about rice cakes in a second, but imagine a rice cake. That consistency, but each one is individual. As opposed to a rice cake where they're stuck together in a cake, each one is individual, but it's puffed. The way they do it is it's done with a vacuum. They're able to, they hydrate it a certain amount. Okay, they soften the grain, has to be softened a certain amount, and then they're able to they shoot it through a gun. It's a way of quickly. It makes it puff. It makes it has to do with drawing a vacuum on it. It makes it like a vacuum and makes the grain. It makes it explode. Okay, it pulls it apart because the air is all pulled away from it. It like draws out the it draws out the grain. Puffed rice and rice cakes are very similar, but Belsky he held that on rice cake, puffed rice you'd make a bari priyadama because it's or a puffed wheat, for instance. We'll see. We'll talk about Ramosha's Tshuva in a second. Puffed wheat, puffed grains, you make a bari priyadama. It is the whole grain. It is just expanded. It's like klai ice. Klai ice are if you roast it. Here, right? We know klayais are bari priyadama. Here it's the same thing. It's just that you expanded it with air. Rice cakes, though, he said really you could make either bracha, dama or mezainis, but he thought it was actually more correct to make a mezonos because he said since it sticks together, it becomes like a ma'aseh kedera. Now, even though it doesn't stick to it, it does stick together because of the heat. The way they make it is again they hydrate some grains, let's say rice. They soften them. They have these softened rice. It's sitting in a circle. Okay, so they'll have it like it's like a mold, and they put the right amount in. They know, let's say you put in 50 different grains in there. It doesn't fill up the hole, but that's the mold. But that's what it is. It's just sitting there. And then when they draw this vacuum on it, it causes them all to puff, and the pressure and the heat. Again, this is done under very high heat. When they do this, they fuse together, and that's why a rice cake you have to peel them apart. They come apart. But you have to peel them. They're actually stuck together. The different grains stick, and then they remove the mold, and you're left with the rice cake.
So if I understand, Rav, it's puffed rice, which is stuck together, and the Belsky svara
it's all done. It's all done simultaneously here. Here it's puffed together with the other grains, so that they stick together and form a cake.
And therefore, it becomes ma'aseh kedera by the sticking process.
Correct. Since the ma'aseh it sticks together, he thought that you can make a mezainis on it. Because now it is a ma'aseh kedera. There's a ma'aseh kedera aspect to it.
So you should make a mezainis misafik because the mezainis patters the adama, right?
Correct. So therefore, it would be better to make a mezainis. He wasn't. Again, I don't know if he was completely convinced about this far because I did hear from him. He said you can make adama, you can make mezainis. He said l'maaseh it sticks together, so it's probably more correct to make a mezainis. It's not. It doesn't stick together the same way as bishul, as a regular bishul, because that was a suffix. But l'maaseh he held. That's what I do. On rice cakes, I make a mezainis. On puffed grains, I make a bari priyadama. Okay, that's what I heard from him. Rice Krispies, though, is a whole different thing. Rice Krispies is cooked rice. It's like regular cooked rice. It's bari mezainis. After they cook the rice, then they make a pellet out of it, and then they crisp it. Then they do some sort of a process also where it's puffed. It's not an individual piece of rice. And that's why they all look exactly uniform, and they have a whole different look to them. It's actually made from, it's like a batter, if you want to call it. And when you say exactly that term, but it's like
a batter.
It's a bad word to use. It's actually made. We'll call it a pellet. It's made from a pellet of rice. The pellet is made from cooked rice. So they cook up a batch of rice. Okay, they cook up a kettle of rice. Then they whatever they do to it. And then they make little pellets out of this rice. An individual rice
crunchy. The point is to make it crunchy.
No. Then they crisp it afterwards. First, they make a pellet, which means it's a single size. It's a single unit that they're creating. So a rice can get chopped up, or maybe it has more than one piece of rice in it. When you're making a rice crispy, it's not an original grain of rice. It's either a part of a grain or it could be a part of more than one grain of rice that make up that rice crispy. And then once they have this pellet, it goes into a certain machine, which again will do a certain process to it, which will cause it to toast it and expand it and make it into a rice crispy. So this is for sure mizonos because it is cooked first, as opposed to the first ones, which are just expanded with air. They're puffed. That's the heat. This has been first cooked in water. It is a regular bishul process that takes place. No shaila about bishul akum by Rice Krispies, therefore. It's cooked rice. Why isn't it bishul akum? Okay, that's a different shmooze. Discuss bishul akum, we discuss Rice Krispies. But that's the shaila. Therefore, Rice Krispies is without a doubt a bari mei mizonos for those who make mizonos on rice. Because it is a cooked rice. As opposed to a puffed rice is not cooked. They are soaked, they are softened, they are not cooked, they are still raw, and then they are puffed. Okay, rice cake is the same as a puffed rice, but it sticks together, and therefore more correct is to make a mizonos. Just want to mention the tshuva. Belsky also mentions this is sort of his basis for a lot of what he writes about granola bars and all these puffed rice is based on a tshuva of Ingris Moshe about something called sugar crisp, cereal, and it's a puffed wheat. Okay, it's not a rice, it's a wheat, but same idea. And therefore, Moshe says it's a beret pre hadama. Talking about sugar crisp. See now, here, if you look at that part underlined, okay, that's something first. Okay, well, let's just read that part underlined on the first paragraph. He says, "Im kain, if you do find that things stick together, that's because when you find things stick together through cooking, that's the aside like this, that through the cooking, it makes tzedakah, made cracks in the klipos, even though it started out as a whole grain, it made cracks in it, be'ezim bekomos, like they said nidbeku, and then that's when you make a bar mizonos. So to turn grains into mizonos, you need to have them stick together. They have to become ma'aseh kedera. And even though it appears as though it's still a whole grain, there are cracks in this layer, in the outer layer.
In the crispy, yeah.
Right. Now, we'll see in the sugar crisp cereal. Now he's going to talk about the sugar crisp. That's in general when you cook things. Now we talk about sugar crisp. In the next paragraph, he says, with the sugar crisp, the garinin adayim shleimim, they still look intact. They still look complete. Sa'av shiroi loymar shebrachos adama. He says it's right to make a bar p'adama. Mikol makom b'svarei makom listapik. Ma'achadu nasa lamazon. There's a different svara though. This food is made to fill you up, for cereal, for breakfast, right? Its purpose is mazon. And therefore, since it's for mazon, there's a tzad to make a mezainis on it. Still, the more proper way to eat this food would be through cooking. And therefore, through cooking, it will become mezainis. So if it's not the CS sugar crisp, okay, assuming that's why people plant it, which is true. He says it's hard to decide, should you make a mezainis, should you make a adama? This is a very important rule here. Suffolk, no, we don't know. Is it for this? Is it for that? So Moshe says the aside, when you start out with a certain bracha, you remain with that bracha until you know otherwise. We remain, we don't know. Is it a mezainis? Is it a dama? So therefore, we'll call it a chazaka. It stays with the chazaka of barei pri hadama. What bracha achrayna do you make? So bracha rishayna, he said, more correct is barei pri hadama. But if you want to make a mezainis, as you can talk about a few lines later, right? Okay, he brings a sheet Kassav Mishnah about it, whatever, fine. But then he says, he says, Mashmashli near like Ledina, fine, Mikomaka b'sugar crisp, Bistaber Kassav Mishnah, Shalchet Yochel Levarech, Bein Bar Pradama, Bein Bar Mizamis. Again, he thinks that Bar Pradama is more roy. Avala HaRav, Yeshel Levarech Bar Nefashos Rabbis. But Lamaisa, what bracha, at the end of the day, what bracha achrayna do you make? You have to make a bar nefashos on it, because the ikar is it's a bar pradama. So this is the aside that Belsky bases a lot of what it is true. He has a tshuva about granola bars. And this is a machlekes. There are those that say it's a mezainis. Belsky's itself held that granola bars you make a bar pradama.
What is granola? Can the Rav define for us granola?
Granola. The definition of a granola is actually a toasted rolled oat. Rolled oats means they soften the oat a little bit. Okay, usually with steam. They'll steam the oats. Okay, so oats look like they look like barley or like wheat originally, and then they put it through rollers. Rolled oats means it goes through metal rollers, which flatten them, and that's why when you buy a granola bar, the grains look flat. They don't look round. The way they do that is they soften it and they put it through rollers, which causes it, because it's softened a little bit, it doesn't crush it. Instead, it flattens it, makes them into these like flat-looking flakes. They're not, as flat as paper, but everyone knows what a granola bar looks like. It's that consistency. It's maybe 2 millimeters thick or something. A flattened piece of, but it's a whole grain. And then they mix it with syrups. The syrups are
Ton of
hot.
sugars,
Sugars and syrups, and they
every
might
color,
add
yeah.
chocolate or they add peanuts or whatever else they add to it, peanut butter. But the idea is it's hot. It's hot syrup. The syrup.
Those are all Tuffles, right? Peanut butter is
Yes,
Tuffle. for
correct. These are
sure,
all
Tuffle.
tuffle to the grain. Correct. Now, in fact, the grain is going to be usually is more than 50%, and the other syrups, anyways, are just there for sweetness and whatever. It's called a granola bar, which means, by definition, that's what a person's eating it for. He's not eating because he wants to eat syrup. He wants to eat granola, but he likes sweet granola, like a person eats Cheerios. He wants to eat Cheerios, but he'll put some honey on it. It's not, obviously he's not eating honey, he's eating Cheerios. He likes sweetness. Same thing over here. Now, there are those who say, well, you add syrup to it, which is hot, and then you bake it. That's even hotter. And they'll bake it in these ovens at about 180, 190, maybe 200 degrees. It's not a real baking that you want to like you would. There are people actually that bake it at home. They even bake it hotter, but might even do it 350. But I don't think that's the way they do it in the factories. My understanding is it's about 180 to 200 degrees. It's done to dry out the grain and to give it a little bit of a toastiness to it. You want to dry out not the grain, but the syrups. You want to harden it. That way, when you take it out of the oven, it will cool. It will become hard. The syrups won't be dry and it won't be wet. They'll be dry. It'll stick together. It'll stay together. It'll be a dry item. Anyway, so there are those who say, well, this is a bishul. Okay. You put it into syrups originally that were, let's say, 150, maybe even hotter. Let's say about 150, maybe 160 degrees. You want your syrup to be hot so that it pours very easily. You don't want it to, be thick and, not mix well. The hotter you heat it, the easier it is. It becomes more water-like. You can mix the grain in and get an even consistency. So they heat it up, let's say, again. So people say, well, look, it's already 150 degrees. And then you put it into an oven, 200 degrees.
So the shaila is, are you turning it from an adama to mezainis? Is that the shaila?
Exactly. You turned it from adama to mezainis.
At what point? At what point?
That's the point. And therefore, at that point, when you baked it, and this I heard also again from somebody from a different Rav at a different kashrus agency where they say to make a ber mizonos. I asked them, why does your Rabbanim say to make a mizonos? They said because it's not possible that this cooking process didn't break down the grains a little bit and cause them to be mistabik. It's a svara, a little bit. It broke it down. It's a bishul. It's not just toasting. There is a little bit of a bishul process here as well. Now, it's possible, again, but it's possible that it didn't. And the fact that the granola bar sticks together, we know why it sticks together. It sticks together because of the syrups that hold it together. To say that the grains actually fuse together and that's what holding together, you don't know. It's impossible to know.
If you look at the granola bar, they don't look like they're fused together. They look right.
It doesn't look like it. Correct. It doesn't look. But the svara, there's a svara that some Rabbanim say, well, but it's a svara, b'stama, something happened.
Pesach, put up a granola bar, Pesach. Yeah, go ahead.
Say what?
Okay, go ahead. Keep on going, Robert.
Okay, so Belsky said would point to this tshuva though for Ramesha, that if you don't know, the bracha starts out bari pri adama until you know it's a mezainis, it says a bari pri adama. The chazaka on this granola bar, all these grains, you want to tell me a svara that it changed? So it's sort of like a maitzi mechaver al varaya. You got to prove it. Until you know, it remains a bari pri adama until you know otherwise that it turned into a bari mezainis.
Chazaka de gufa on the
correct.
Adam.
It's a chazaka de gufa, we'll call it, and therefore you have no raya. You could postulate however you like. You want to say like this and say like that, but what do we see? We don't see any change. Like you said, I look at a granola bar, I don't see a change. But the syrups were hot, but they baked it, but I don't see anything. To me, it still looks like a toasted grain. That's all it looks like. And the fact that it sticks together because of the syrup. The chazaka is it's a bari pri adama. It went in a bari pri adama. It comes out a bari pri adama. And therefore, Belsky again held the bracha doesn't change. And you want to bring a raya, so I might see mechaver al raya. Okay, do I have one last minute?
Yeah, we only have a few minutes, so maybe we'll just, we'll go outside. I don't know what Satan is not the Satan.
Should I talk about the Pringles quickly?
Let's finish with Pringles, yes, if you don't
Okay,
mind.
Pringles. Okay, so Pringles again is Shiloh. Potato chips we all know are Ber Adama. It's a slice of potato, so that's no Shiloh. A Pringle is made from potato flour, which means that they cook up potatoes, they dehydrate them, means they remove all the water. It grinds into a powder like a flour. Mamish looks like flour, and then when they want to make a Pringle, they put the ingredients back together again. And then they add oils to it. They add a lot of oils to it. They add salt and flavorings and whatever it is. There's people who said to me, the bracha on Pringles should be a shahakal because the potato flour is less than 50% of the Pringle. Now, I'm not even sure if that's exactly true, but it could be. Very possible. It's in some countries they list the percentages of each ingredient on the thing, and it says potato flour. 48%.
What else could it be, quite around? I mean, what's cheaper than potatoes that they would want to mix in? Flour is cheaper. Why would they?
No.
What
It's
else?
not that they add other flour. No, they add potato flour, but it's not the rive. The rive is the oils and the seasonings and all the other things that they add in. When you cook a potato chip, there's a lot of oil, in potato chips. So the argument was that the potatoes are actually less than rive of the chip. Now, this is a mistake for several reasons.
Okay.
It's a mistake because, first of all, we know that when you go by halacha, we don't go by percentages of weight, we go by percentages of volume. And by volume, a potato flour, even though it's not so heavy, it takes up a lot of volume, as opposed to oils, which are much more dense, and they're going to be much heavier. Oil is almost the same as water in terms of its density.
Can I ask for a second here, because I have the Pringle here, courtesy
Yes.
of our incredible staff.
Does it
And
tell
I'm going to
you,
read the ingredients to the rub. So it's dry potatoes for Teitzach,
right?
oil for Teitzach, a whole bunch of different types, 5 different types of oil.
Correct. Does it tell you the amount of potato?
Here comes the stuff that's negated. Germinated yellow corn flour,
Okay.
cornstarch,
Okay.
rice flour,
Yes.
maltodextrin,
Yes.
who knows this? Mono and diglycerides,
Correct.
salt, and wheat starch.
Okay.
Enough chazarite to raise the
No,
cholesterol.
but the potato flour
right.
that's in there is something like
right.
40, close to 50%. It's like 40 something percent. It doesn't say it on this one because this is an American brand. I think you have to get one from HaRavYisroel or from a European country where they make them list the percentages of each ingredient, and you can get those, and it'll say potato. The first one, potato flour, and it'll say 46%. So there are those who said it's only 46%. The Rav is not. So therefore, it shouldn't be. So there's 2 arguments against this. First of all, you go by volume, not by weight. That 46% probably represents something like 60% by volume, if I had to guess. Because the oils, which are the significant amount of weight of the potato, are much more dense than the potatoes. Second of all, we don't go by weight or by volume. Really, we go by, when it comes to Iker v'Tafel, you go by what is the Iker? What are you interested in? Person does not buy a Pringle because they want oil or because they want salt or because they want maltodextrin, right? They're buying a Pringle because of the potatoes. The potato is the Iker by all definitions. Even if it would be the meat, it would still be the bracha on the potatoes. Okay, so clearly the Iker of a Pringle is a potato. It is, by my understanding, it is the Rav, but even if it wouldn't be the Rav, it is anyways the Iker. Now the question is, but what bracha do you make on potato flour? Okay, perhaps, I would think, I don't know for sure, but perhaps if you would eat it plain as a potato flour, it's like a derech achila type of thing to eat potato flour. Just like if a person would eat regular flour, he'd make a shahakal. I would guess if you ate potato flour, you'd probably make shahakal too. It's a weird way of eating things. But if you rehydrate it, if you put the oil back into it, you rehydrate, right, which is what they do basically. They add a lot of oil back to these potato flour, and they get it back to being, instead of adding water, they're adding oil, and they get it to be a certain consistency, which looks like a mashed potatoes type of consistency. And then they bake it or fry it or whatever exactly they do with it. So Question is, what bracha do you make on this? So really the question starts with what bracha do you make on, let's start with what bracha do you make on mashed potatoes? And the Mishnah Berurah already tells us that. Mishnah Berurah in Siman Reish Beis. What?
Reish Beis, yes, sorry.
Reish Beis says, he's talking about if things are nisrasik, if things are ground up, he's talking about by dates. If dates are nisrasik like they legamrei, when you ground up dates, even though you mush it up into a paste, it still has the same consistency of the date. So therefore, it's going ard apple. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the same thing applies to an ard. Ard apple is a potato. If you mash it up, make mashed potatoes, even though some things we make up, like if you take an apple and you mash it up and you make applesauce, so the minhag limit we'll see is most people make a shahakal. We say it doesn't have the consistency of an apple anymore. It no longer represents. It's completely
What if you remake it into a latke?
What if you make
You took the potato flour and you fried it back into a potato latke?
Oh, okay. We'll talk about potato flour. Right now, we're just talking about mashed potatoes. Okay, so mashed potatoes still contain the consistency of the potato. It doesn't lose it. It's still the same. If you eat mashed potatoes, it feels like you're eating a potato. And as opposed to applesauce with an apple, it's totally different. So
no, but it says asan ki isa. It's an isa. What if you made it like sauce, like the mashed potatoes? You put water. He said, but what does he mean?
Okay, if you make a different consistency, maybe not. You could lose a consistency too. If I water it down to make like a soup, like maybe it'll be different. But if I make it like an isa, a mashed potato, that's what he means, an isa. Okay, I mashed it up. Asan ki isa. It's just a dough. It's a mashed potato dough. So even though now it's a dough, it doesn't have the original. It's completely broken down, right? But still, it's still a bari pri adama, and that's what the Mishnah says.
As creamy as the mashed potato is, it's an adama. Bottom line.
Correct. Mashed potatoes are bari pri adama, and that's mafurish in the Mishnah Berurah. So we see there's something different, perhaps, about a potato, and it still contains its consistency. There's a different halacha brought in Reish Ches about if you grind up different grains, beans, they become shahakal, and if you make a bean bread, it becomes shahakal. And you make a bar nefashos afterwards. The Mishnah Berurah explains over here in Reish Ches. He says this machul legamrei. Davka she'asa tavshil mikemach shel kitnius. He's talking about if you made a bean bread. Derech is we eat beans. I don't know how many people have eaten bean bread. Not so common, right? It's not the way you normally eat a bean. So it says the Mishnah Berurah she'ein derech achilasa bekach. That's not the standard way to eat it. If you ground it up, mamish like flour, right? It becomes shahakal. Okay, but if you do it a different way, there are certain grains that they talk about where it is more normal to do, to turn them into. So here comes the shaila now by potatoes. Potato flour is a very, very common thing to make. In fact, I would guess I don't know if roiv, but it's not roiv, close to roiv of the potatoes are turned into potato flour. That's the way you store it. That's the way you use it. You'll notice in lots of products that has potato flour. There's something else called potato starch, which is a different item. We're not discussing potato starch. It comes up a lot on Pesach. Potato starch, that is shahakal. That is not the original taste or original form or anything of the potato. It is a part of the potato. It is not the whole thing. It is the starch only. We're not discussing that. Belsky in his tshuva makes mention of that your potato starch cookies are shahakal. That is not a shayla. And they don't taste at all like potatoes. Right? If anyone ate a potato starch cookie and tastes like potato, they would be disgusted. But when you make a potato flour and you reconstitute it, you add the water back in, it comes back mamish to being the same consistency as the potatoes, and it is the darcham to do it. It is normal to do it, and Belsky says that Moshe himself had this suffix on what is the status of instant potatoes. He said originally he thought it was shahakal. At some later point he switched, and he said no. Maybe he understood how common it was, and he said it is a bari pri adama. Now, Belsky, in a way, took this a step further, because my understanding is Ramesh's Tshuva was not about Pringles, but it was Ramesh's Psak was about instant potatoes, which they serve at every chasna. You know, they give you the instant potatoes over there. What about if I take the instant potatoes now and I grind it up? I use it in a Pringle. I use it in a different or a latke or whatever it is. I make something else out of it. It doesn't have the consistency anymore of the original potato. It has a new consistency. So Belsky felt that since it originally first started out as mashed potatoes, and at that point it became back to being bar priyadama again, it'll remain even though it is now turned into a Pringle or a latke or any of these type of things. I think there are those who disagree. They say that on a Pringle you make a shahakol. Could be they disagree with Ramesh's original psak. I mean, not the original, the changed psak, the psak of Ramesh about the instant potatoes. Maybe they would hold those to a shahakol. Or it could be, even if you held that is, what's it called? Even if you hold that is a bari pri adama on the instant potatoes, once you changed it into a chip or a latke or something different, maybe they would hold that that's really too much of a change. That would be more like the the mina kidneys that you turned into a bread that we say is a shahakol. I don't know. But anyway, I heard from Belsky that you do make a Pringles, and we published this in the Daf HaKashrus a number of years ago, where Belsky was still alive. He wrote us this tshuva that he held Pringles are adama. And it has to do with this psak of Ramesha that instant potatoes remain bar adama because it's normal to do it this way, and they come back to the original consistency, and therefore he didn't hold that he held that they remain a bar adama.
Okay, yes, we see the original handwritten tshuva of Belsky, which we can send around. The rebel will get a copy.
Yes.
Last question here: the taco good shaila. Cakes made out of potato flour and Pesach. What bracha?
Again, I'm not aware of any cakes made out of potato flour. I know of cakes made out of potato starch. And Belsky addresses it in that tshuva, and in that handwritten tshuva. He writes, potato starch is shahakol. It does not have the taste or consistency or anything of the potato. It is a shinoi, and therefore it is a shahakol. If a person were to make a cake out of potatoes flour, it would taste like you're eating mashed potatoes. So I don't think anyone would ever do it. But if they do, if there's a recipe, I could be wrong.
Everything is
I don't know what
everything
you
is possible,
but I never heard of such. It's
Okay,
possible, but it's doubtful. I think the person's making a mistake. I think they're talking about potato starch.
Okay, we left